Hi everybody, welcome back to part 6. This is the final part of this double Gannet build, the new Airfix kit. And in this final part we'll be doing all the final details to bring these two models together. So the canopies, the bomb loadout or the weapons loadout and the bomb bays. I'll fit the flaps to this aircraft and of course do the wing fold on the Arc Royal version of the kit. So we better make a start this week. There's a lot to do, a lot to cover, and we'll get over to the bench and make a start. Okay, let's get the last bits and pieces done on these two Gannets. And I'm going to start off with the transparencies. Usually I paint transparencies as part of the airframe, so I would fit the windscreen and this section and paint them alongside the rest of the airframe, and that's so that you get a colour match between the canopies and the airframe a bit more easily. If you leave them off like this and paint them separately, you've just got to pay attention to getting the right sort of coverage of paint so that they match up when you assemble them. The other thing that I've done is to just remove a centre seam from all of the sliding sections of the canopy. And Airfix have got that centre seam because they've moulded the bulge correctly in these sliding canopies. It doesn't take much to remove. I've just used successive grades of micro mesh. In this case I used these pads, and I went right the way through all the grades from 3600 up to 12,000, and then finished them off with a polish with some of this, which is Tamiya polishing compound. This particular one is the finish compound. It's very fine, but there are another two, a coarse and a medium grade as well. These didn't need that because after the 12,000 micromesh they were already fairly shiny, and I got rid of the final bits of scratches and cloudiness with this compound, so they're ready to go. So once the canopies are all cleaned up, I've masked off the insides, ready for masking off the external frames. So I'll just do this last one. This is a fixed centre section between the pilot and the first observer. Okay, that's everything sealed off from the inside. So now we'll do the exterior masks. I'm not sure that there's a commercially available masking set for the Airfix Gannet yet. It's quite a new kit, but I'm sure there will be one in due course. But I'm going to mask the outside off with a little bit of a different technique than normal. I usually use masking tape for the exterior masking, but this time I'm going to try this, which is liquid latex. So this is used in things like the film industry for makeup and things like that. And this was sent to me by one of my patrons, Gary, who uses it quite a lot. I've used it once for a camouflage scheme and it works really well. I'll be showing you that on some other builds later on, but I'm going to try it on this occasion for the exterior canopy masks. So I've just descanted some into this bottle. It's actually an old mask oil bottle, and it's possible that you could use mask oil as well for this type of work, but I'll give this a go. So I'm just using a sharpened cocktail stick to put some of the latex onto the window that we're going to be masking off, and just move it towards the edge of the frames. And what you find is that the latex goes by surface tension, I suppose. It's something like that that just draws it into the edge of the frame, so it goes very accurately up to the edge of the mask where you want it. If you put some in the middle like that, you can move it around and just draw it down to the edge of the frame. This is just a sharpened toothpick cocktail stick, and you need that to get into the sharp angles on some of these windows. So if you just angle the piece to the light, you can see the edges of the frames a bit more clearly, and that allows you to accurately move the latex right to the edge of the frame. And just let that surface tension do the work for you to draw the latex right up to the edge. And at this stage I'll just let that dry before I do the other side, because I want it to lay it more or less horizontally. If you stand it up, the latex tends to run down and it can draw away from some of the frames, and it can also pool down at the bottom, which you don't want because it can run over the frame slightly. So that's all good. I'll just prop that up on its side, and you'll be able to see when it's dry it goes darker. In the meantime, I'll get on with the rest, get them all finished up, ready for the first coat of paint. So this is the windscreen, or at least one of the windscreens, and you can see now how the latex has gone dark. So that's fully dry, that's ready for some paint. So just a final check before you apply any paint that the latex hasn't run where it shouldn't have done, and you're going to get a nice clean edge to the frame. So that looks good, that's ready. These are all our canopy pieces after a coat of Mr. Surfacer. I've used Mr. Surfacer 1500 black. So now I'm going to apply a coat of extra dark sea grey, the AK extra dark sea grey, to these parts. And I'll just be offering them up to the fuselages all the time, just to make sure that I get the right colour match, as I mentioned earlier on. So I'll get the airbrush loaded up and get all these transparencies painted. Okay, let's get these unmasked. In the end, as usual, the AK paint took 3 to 4 coats to get the same sort of colour density as I've got on the fuselage. Now, one word of warning about these canopies is just to be careful how you're removing them from the sprue, because I've managed to crack one of mine. Fortunately, it's the one on the second observer's canopy, and that means that I can hide it under the wing fold on the Ark Royal Gannet, which is a bit of a lucky escape really. I don't quite know how I managed to do it. I just felt it crack underneath my fingers when I was polishing the canopies before masking. And because of that experience, I'm going to be removing these with a cutting disc in a motor tool. That puts less stress on the joint, and hopefully we'll get away without any further damage. Now, this is the really satisfying part of using the latex, which is removing it and hopefully getting a good result with the masking. Just tidying up around the edges. There's just 1 or 2 little bits that need to be removed. Okay, I'm happy with those. That latex has worked really well, so thanks Gary for sending that over. And I think I'll be using it again on canopies in the future, as well as some camouflage masking as well. I suppose the thing with it on canopies is you've got to have a moulding where the frame is quite well defined and has got that recess in it. It'd be more difficult with a less well moulded canopy, I suspect. But on this kit it's worked perfectly. Okay, so let's get these off the sprues now, and I'm going to use, as I said, this cutting disc in the motor tool. So that'll put less pressure on the sprue gate, and hopefully it'll prevent any further damage. I'll just trim off the excess with a new file. Obviously we'll just have to touch up the inside of the frame here once we've got it level. Okay, that's come off nice and clean. I'll do the same with all the other ones, and then we can go on to the next step. We do have some decals to fit to these frames, which is going to be a bit of a test, I think, because they're so narrow, but we'll see how we get on with those. In the meantime, I'll get all these prepped, ready for that next step. Now while I'm working on this canopy, I want to just sort out the aerial mast, which is this part H11, and we have another little bit of an issue, at least on my kit here, that one of these is a little bit short moulded by about 4mm, something like that. It's quite a noticeable difference. So I'm going to have to fix that. It'll look a little bit odd if I've got two masts of different lengths on the models when they're displayed side by side. So I've had a rummage in the spares box, and I've come up with a replacement mast which will give me the correct length. More or less, it's a tiny little bit shorter than the good moulded one, but it's close enough. So I'll get those painted up ready for fit into this canopy section. Now to finish these canopies off, the sliding elements of the canopy, we've got these braking decals to fit, and to be honest they're a bit of a chore. They've got to go right along a very fine frame on the canopy here. But you couldn't really do this with any less quality decal, because these cartograph printed decals are very thin, and actually they do go, they're a perfect fit. It's just that there's so many of them, but there's no point complaining about it. We'll just get on with it. It's good that Airfix provide them as an option. I have seen a few of these kits built up, and more than one of them have dispensed with some of the stencils. And I can understand why a builder would want to do that, because, as I said, they do take up a lot of time to finish these details off. Try to get them on first time like that, because if you start to move them around, they're so fine that you risk creasing them and folding them. And if that happens, you're probably not going to get them back into shape. So try not to mess about with them too much. Just get them into position, and I'll just give them a dab of microsol, because the other thing that these have got to contend with is some very fine raised rivets around the edge of the canopy frame. So that's the bottom with the instruction on. We've also got some dash lines to put around the front and back frames as well, but I'm going to let these dry first. So I'll carry on with these. Obviously I've got 6 canopies to do, so it's all good fun. I'll get on and do those, and then we'll fit the windscreen and fix part of the canopy onto the 2 airframes. Okay, so I'm going to attach the fixed part of the canopies first of all. I won't put the sliding hoods on until a bit later on, probably one of the last things to go on the build. And to attach them I'm going to be using this usual glue for me, Formula 560 canopy glue. It's some form of acrylic white glue, but I've found that it's quite strong, and it's lasted the course on previous builds that I've used it on. So first up we've got this gun sight. Just give the windscreen a final clean before it goes on. This glue obviously dries clear, so we don't have to worry about it showing, but even so it's worthwhile just being careful where you're putting it. I've had a delivery today, which was a little bit of a surprise. I mentioned that I'd damaged one of the sliding canopies, and 2 days after asking for it, Airfix have sent me a replacement for that L2 part. So that's pretty good service really from Airfix. I only sent the email requesting the part on Monday, I think it was, and today's Friday. So they've turned the whole thing round in less than a week. Originally I got an email from them to say that the spares department was really busy and it could be up to 28 days. So that's good, I'm pleased about that. Let's just be a bit more careful with that one. The other thing that I've just received today also relates to the windscreen that I've just fitted. Not this, obviously. This is a stencil sheet for an upcoming F4B build, Tamiya F4B build that I'm going to be doing on my Patreon channel starting next week. So that looks fun, plenty of stencils to fit. But this is what I was waiting for. This is a set of windscreen wipers, photo etch windscreen wipers. You remember that I mentioned that Airfix provided 2 sets of windscreen transparencies. This one here has got a moulded in windscreen wiper, but they also provide the one that I've fitted, which is just plain, and it allows you to fit these photo etch wipers as well. So obviously that's going to look a little bit better than trying to mask off around the moulded on wiper. So there's the reference. This is from a company called Hauler Model Accessories, HLX 48374, 48 scale wipers. I think actually they're designed for model trucks and cars and things like that, so they're automotive, but they're just as good for these wipers on this Gannet. So I'll fit those towards the end of the build. Obviously they're a bit delicate to be putting on just now. At this stage I'm just gathering together all the smaller detail parts so we can finish this pair of Gannets off. So we've got things like the wing folds, the rocket rails, flap actuators. These are the actuators for the bomb bay doors. So all those final bits and pieces that add that final bit of detail to the model. And this is a stage really where I think it's best to pay particular attention to what you're doing, because it's very easy when you're closing in on the end of the build to start rushing it and to just skimp over some of these parts, which really do set the model off if you get them right. So it's a shame to spend a lot of time getting the basic airframe together, painting it and weathering it nice, if you spoil it by rushed detail parts like this. I've also put together and started to paint all the stores. So we've got some torpedoes, some depth charges, and these are sonar buoys. And I'll talk a little bit more about those when we come to fit them. What I try to do at this stage is to group together all the detail parts that are going to be more or less the same colour and get them all mounted like this, and that just saves a lot of time swapping and changing colours in the airbrush if you do them all together. See, the radome's just basically a thimble shape. Clean that up and get it painted. So I'm going to carry on doing all the painting and weathering on these parts, and there's quite a bit to do with the stores. Apart from painting them, they've also got quite a number of decals to fit on them, so it'll take quite a while to do all that. We've got 10 sonar buoys, 6 depth charges and a pair of torpedoes to do. So I'll come back when these are all painted up and we can get them into the bomb bays. Okay, time to load out the aircraft now. And on this particular version, the Arc Royal version, I'm going to be loading her with depth charges and sonar buoys, which are these. So 6 depth charges in 2 sticks of 3 and a rack of 5 sonar buoys. Do the depth charges first. These are Mark 11 depth charges. So there's quite a lot of work involved with these weapons. There's quite a number of decals to fit to them, and because of that you've got gloss coating and flat coating to do, as well as the basic painting. So they take quite a bit of time to do. Probably the better part of a day yesterday to get all these sorted out. These sonar buoys were dropped into the water, into the sea, and they deployed and sent an acoustic message back to the aircraft if anything was detected. So in the anti-submarine role these were used quite a lot. And I think they are still used in their current forms. You might be able to hear outside it's stormy again. It's been a really bad winter for storms in the north of England, well, in England generally. I just need to check where these are going. So just checking these, they don't actually go in the position that Airfix tell you to fit them. If you did, there wouldn't be room for the second stack at the back here. So for this Cyprus-based aircraft, I'm going to be fitting the sonar buoys again. But in this case we've got a pair of torpedoes. These were homing torpedoes. I think they were Mark 30s, I can't remember offhand. Obviously they look a little bit different to the wartime torpedoes that we've probably been used to building before. I think these are hooks for the catapult. Tiny little details that Airfix have provided. Just all adds to the overall impression on the model when it's finished. So with the weapons loaded, I can now fit the bomb bay doors and the nose gear doors as well. So we'll start off with the retraction jacks. Now this is a bit of a peculiar arrangement because the door doesn't actually have any hinges at the bottom. So the fitment just relies on the tops of the jacks, which is a bit peculiar. So I'm not going to mess about with those too much. Get the nose gear doors on next. Okay, so I'll repeat that process with the Arc Royal version, and next I think I'll come back to this aircraft and get the flaps fitted. Okay, so these are all our parts for the flaps, all painted and weathered. These are the actuators, and Airfix helpfully here have put on the positions for all these actuators because they're each different. So P1, P2, P3, P4 for the port side actuators, and the same for the starboard obviously. What that enables you to do is just clip these off once they've been painted and weathered, as these have, and fit them one by one. So that's really clever engineering, and just makes what could be quite a complicated part of the build hopefully a little bit easier. So I'll just flip the aircraft on its back so we get access to these starboard positions. I'm just checking how much of this tab to remove because it's not absolutely clear in the instructions. So these are pretty much a clip fit. Now they're a bit tight, so I'm just going to ease the little tab here that goes into the underside of the wing. So these are quite delicate, you don't want to be forcing them into position. These actually clip in without any cement. So that just makes for a bit of a neater job. One improvement you can make to these parts is to just accentuate the fastener detail, which is a little bit soft just because of the limitations of the moulding process. So I've just got a riveting tool here, and I'll just go to the little indentations that are in the kit and just sharpen up those fasteners. And once these have been painted, I can just add a little bit of panel liner just to help bring those fasteners out. They are quite prominent on photographs of the Gannet, so it's a quick job that's worth doing, I think. Okay, closing steps on these now, and turn the aircraft over again, get the radome fitted. Now Airfix give us an option with the radome, but really only if you're building the aircraft in flight, in other words with the wheels up, because if you've got the wheels down like this and it's going on the ground, the radome's got to be retracted. So right at the beginning of the build, when you're closing the fuselage up, you've got to decide which option you're going to be going for. These are the exhausts, which are one-piece mouldings, which is nice. So Airfix give us a little key on these which engages with a hole in the bulkhead here, and that just ensures that both of these exhausts go in at the correct sort of angle. You just need to jiggle around a little bit till you find where the key is. And you'll know because the exhaust pushes fully home like that. It's always a bit of a nerve-wracking part of any build at this stage, because you're applying glue to basically a finished model, and it's very easy just to get a little spot of glue somewhere where you don't want it. That's just a little bit tight. We've probably got a little bit of flash around the edge here, so I'll just clear that out a little bit. I don't want to scratch the painted exhaust. So that hopefully will just ease its way in. That's better. So we'll do the wing folds next, and or at least the first wing fold, which is this one, and this part's been painted and weathered, and we'll just push this in. I'm not going to glue it. I've checked with the other side and it's strong enough to hold the upper part of the wing without any trouble, so just pop that in. That's a really nice fit, and you can see that the wing fold has this moulded hinge here which is integral to the main part, so it's nice and strong. And this is a separate piece with this large spar, if you like, in it, and that ensures that the next part of the wing goes on really securely. And that is this middle section of wing. Just need to finish this up. We've got the rocket rails to fit. So again, I'm just going to push fit these into place. The fit's tight enough to hold them in position, and it's just a bit risky at this stage applying glue over these decals, so I don't want to take a chance. I'll just push these in. And I know that I'm building two of these, but it's taken an awfully long time to get these finished, and that's because Airfix have provided so much detail in the model. The decal sheet is really extensive, and that's what takes a lot of the work. So for example, on these rocket rails, each one has a tiny decal on the front pillar here, and it's tiny little details like that that just set the model off. So as I said, it takes a long time, but hopefully it'll be worth it when we've done. Now, the way that I'm going to tackle these is to fix the outer wing panel, which needs a little bit of work because we've got a couple of spars, if you like. Now, what I've found is that this hinge here is a little bit tight. This diameter here of the peg is a little bit too big for the corresponding hole in this outer wing panel, and you don't want to be forcing this. It's very delicate. So I'm just going to ease the hole in the outer wing panel, just a tiny amount, 2 millimeters. And hopefully that will improve things a little bit. So again, that's just a push fit. I'm not going to apply any glue to that. It's very solid, and it's really nice engineering of the kit to be able to do that. I'll do the other side as well in the same way. Before I fit these wings, I'll just touch in the navigation lights. If you've seen the previous episode, you'll know that this whole wingtip was moulded by Airfix in clear, which is a neat solution for such a small lamp as this. So I'm going to put a tiny spot of CA on this spar right at the end. I don't want it pushing out onto the wing fold. And I'll also put a drop in this rear location point. It doesn't need much. And I'll just check that the starboard wing will go on in the same sort of position. We want them to look more or less balanced, port and starboard. Sorry about the jackdaws outside arguing. They've got to be one of the most argumentative birds you can come across. There we are, we just need them just to match up port and starboard, particularly here where they nearly touch at the end of the ailerons. If you didn't get those straight, it would be fairly obvious at that point. Next we've got the aerial masts. You might remember that one of these in one of my kits was a bit short, so I had to make it up from the spares box. This particular aircraft carried a pair of bomb racks, and I've drilled the holes out for these earlier on in the build. The Cypress machine didn't appear with them on the photographs I have of it, so I'm going to leave them off that one. They're rather a strange position on the wing. They're right on the first break of the wing fold, so you can see them overhanging a little bit. But that is correct. These are my wipers that I showed you earlier on, and I've just taken a couple off which pretty much match the moulding on the Airfix kit. I showed you this earlier on, where Airfix give you a choice of two windscreens, one with the moulded in wiper and the ones that I fitted to the two aircraft, which has just got a plain windscreen, and you need to fit these photo etch ones, which I think, or I hope, will look better. So they just need painting black, and I'll just attach them with a little bit of white PVA. These are the parts for the propellers. In this case, the Ark Royal aircraft. So this particular spinner has needed quite a bit of masking to get the blue and white bands in the right place, but I just followed my reference photographs to show where the demarcations were. It adds a nice splash of colour to the model, I think. Now you remember that earlier on in the video I just accentuated these little screw marks, and I'll just drop a little bit of panel liner into those. Airfix actually provides some decals for these fasteners, but on the photographs I've got of these aircraft you can't see them. They look as though they've been painted over, which isn't a surprise. You can imagine the crews painting these blue and white bands and just painting over the stencil marks. So it's a good excuse not to add to the workload. So those are the contra-rotating props for the two airframes, and just adds even more interest to an aircraft that's already got quite a lot of quirks. These were powered independently by the two Mamba engines, but through a common gearbox. So we'll get those onto the models, and then the last job is just to get the canopies on, the sliding canopies, and just fit an aerial wire onto the fin. So this is Van der Rosten rigging thread, and I've pre-drilled a hole on the fin, just on the leading edge there, just to tuck that in. I'll just secure that with a tiny drop of CA. Just let that set up for a moment. Just checking that it's going to hold. And again, just a spot on the mast. This elastic thread needs very little of the super glue to bond. But I sometimes think the more you put on, the harder it is to glue the thread. I just form a couple of insulators using some PVA, just a spot. We can paint these black, once they've dried. The last couple of jobs just to fit the wipers and then the props, and then these two are done. There we are, all finished. Okay, so that's it. We're all done for another build series, and I've really enjoyed these two new Airfix kits. They go together really well. The detail's really good, but they are quite a bit of work, not because they're difficult to put together, but because there's so much detail in them. And especially the decal sheet is absolutely enormous. It takes ages to fit all the decals, and quite a few people, as I mentioned in the video, probably won't bother with all of them. But I'm really happy with the result, and they really look nice together, particularly the contrast between the wings extended and the wing fold version. So I'm glad I did that, and it's really thanks to one of my patrons, Alan, who sponsored the build and provided one of these kits, that I was able to build the two versions. I probably, if it was down to me, I probably wouldn't have done that on my own. So thanks, Alan, your support's really appreciated on this one. So in terms of what's coming up next with the channel, I've just got one build episode on the Bismarck, the 200 scale trumpeter Bismarck, to finish, just to complete that build. I've just been waiting since Telford to do the final bits and pieces on that, but we'll finish that off in one episode. And then for my next naval build, I was intending to tackle the Isle of Kit's HMS Ark Royal. That's a 1350 scale kit, but I'm really struggling with getting some aftermarket for that, so I'm just going to put that to one side. So what I'm going to be tackling next is this Flyhawk 1700 scale kit of HMS Ajax 1939. This is one of the 3 British and Commonwealth ships that took part in the Battle of the River Plate against the Graf Spee. And it's not a scale that I'm normally used to building, so it's going to be quite a test of the eyesight, because this contains photo etch and I'll be using a bit of 3D printed aftermarket on it as well. So that'll be coming up after the final episode of the Bismarck build. Over on Patreon, I'm starting with this Tamiya Phantom, the F4B. Lots of aftermarket on that, but that's exclusive over on Patreon. And to start an occasional series, I'm going to be making a start next week on this Border Models 132 scale Lancaster. It's the standard version of the kit, which has been around for 2 or 3 years probably now. And a lot of you will know that Border Models have just released the Dambuster version of this kit with a few improvements to it. But this is the standard kit. I'll be building it more or less straight out of the box. And that's a build that I'm going to be doing for another of my patrons, Gary. That'll be an occasional series. I'm not going to be doing it week in, week out. It's going to take a while. And I've already just built a HK Models 132 scale Lancaster, so I'm not going to dive straight in. It'll just be, as I said, occasionally appearing on the channel. So I hope you've enjoyed the build series here, and a lot of you are building the Gannet. I know there's been a lot of interest in the new Airfix kit, and hopefully you're enjoying it just as much as I've enjoyed building these two. So until next time, look after yourselves everybody, stay safe, but most of all enjoy your modelling, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.